Oh, hey there. Welcome to the Josh and Tyler Show. You caught me spinning the Beatles' Rubber Soul. Love this album. It's got my favorite Beatles song on here. I'm Looking Through You. Hence, because they did it on the Muppet Show. They did it on the Vincent Price episode. Anyway, today we have the best 10 films of 2020. These are films that were released in 2020 or films that came out, and you're probably wondering, where's Tyler? Where's the guy that I like? Where's the guy with the stunning personality that consumes... Let me just set that down. I like the Beatles. That consumes the whole frame. Unfortunately, we are doing this apart due to COVID, but we're still going to do our top 10 and our worst 5. So I'm going to throw it to Tyler for number 10, but the criteria for this list is it a movie? We include theatrical releases as streaming releases, pretty much anything that is a feature length that has come out this year. Tyler, how are you?
What's going on, guys? I'm Tyler, and there is no perfect movie. And 2020 has not been a perfect year. I'm not going to go on and on about that, because really, what's the fucking point? And that's not really what we're here to talk about today. We are here to talk about the top 10 best movies of 2020. And a lot of people are going to say it's ridiculously easy to narrow it down to 10. Not me, because not only did I see multiple movies on multiple different streaming platforms, but when theaters were open and when they reopened, I took every chance that I got to revisit not just big Hollywood blockbusters that were being released at the time, but also to check out smaller indie movies that, in a weird way, kind of had more of a chance to stand out because theaters had very limited options on what they could actually show. So there were more hidden gems that I got to discover this year than any other year. I actually got to watch more than 1 or 2 Canadian movies. I'm Canadian, and that rarely ever happens. I saw 5 or 6 Canadian movies, some of which in the exact theater that Josh works at, and you know what? I'm really glad I did. I'm glad that I got the opportunity. So without wasting any more time, here are my top 10 favorite movies of 2020. But before I get into that, there are a few honorable mentions that I want to talk about because I had a great time watching them, and I feel like even if I talk about them for a couple seconds, hopefully someone will think, he likes that? Maybe I should check it out. So my honorable mentions are Let Him Go, Disappearance at Clifton Hill, Random Acts of Violence, The Nest, The Way Back, and One Night in Miami. At various different points, I thought all of those movies would be in my top 10. Definitely check them out if you haven't already.
For my honorable mentions, Tyler, you mentioned a bunch of great ones. I want to include Bad Boys for Life. I very much enjoy Will Smith running around being crazy, and I think Bad Boys for Life is a great third installment. Random Acts of Violence, as you have noted, is a wonderful, wonderful horror film that is available on Shudder if you have not seen it. It's directed by the How to Train Your Dragon guy, J somebody. Super bloody, super awesome, but a very creative premise at the end of the day. Birds of Prey, I enjoyed very much. I didn't love it, but there were so many good elements of this movie that I could definitely sit back and watch. It's definitely more of a Harley Quinn movie as opposed to a Birds of Prey movie, but there's a lot of strong characters and some great action sequences, and I love that kid. Deep Blue Sea 3 came out, and Tremors Shrieker Island. Yes, I watched those. Those are my honorable mentions. Did I mention I like Deep Blue Sea? I don't have the poster, but that'd be a really dope poster, you know? That's the one, clarification, where Samuel L. Jackson gets eaten by a shark. Oh, and LL Cool J is in it as a chef who can blow up sharks with ovens or something. It's freaking sweet.
Number 10 is, in my opinion, the best Canadian movie of the year, Brandon Cronenberg's Possessor. It's a movie that you have to watch from start to finish in order to have a concrete and honest, fair opinion about it. Because for the first half hour or so, I actually thought that Brandon Cronenberg was wasting a lot of time. He wasn't really taking that many opportunities with its concept and the scares that you could have produced as a result. It's the type of movie where if you watch it for 5-10 minutes on TV and you get instantly bored, you turn it off before, in any event, you might change your mind about it. But since I was in a theater, I didn't have that option. I stuck with it, and I was rewarded for it in the process because the gory action set pieces are extremely unsettling, extremely well done without ever being too grotesque or exploitive. The directing techniques that Cronenberg uses, where he combines rapid-fire editing with three different neon colors, red, blue, and yellow, for different symbolic purposes, in order to create this incredibly surreal and fucked up atmosphere that is elevated by the lead performances from Andrea Riseborough and Christopher Abbott, who are incredibly haunting, and both of their performances, when they're fighting over this one body, leads to an incredibly intense climax, one of the best of the year. And as a Canadian, I just got to give a shout out to how the cinematography makes Ontario, Toronto in particular, just look really damn cool and unique.
At my number 10, Tyler, I have The Climb, directed by Michael Angelo Covino. It's a dark comedy about two best friends who go through life and struggles and this complex relationship they have. One friend is kind, the other friend cheats on him and his wife and steals from him, and all these horrible things. Now, this is a Canadian-French comedy starring, directed by the two folks that are in it, Michael Angelo and Kyle Marvin. This is a very unique Canadian film. It starts off with one of the most unique sequences I think I've seen in film all year, with a simple cycling sequence, driving up a hill in one shot. Now, I can imagine that if this is one shot, they might have sliced it together, etc., that this would be very tiring for them. And so it draws you in immediately with its very dry humor. And this is not laugh out loud funny. It's very dry. It's split up into unique sections showing different parts in their life. It's not a linear story. It's all over the place. But it tells this story of these two people that cannot be torn apart no matter what. And I think it's said best. And again, this is in the trailer, so there's no spoilers here. I think it's said best when they get to the very top of the hill and they're having a conversation. He says, I slept with your wife. And he's like, slept? What do you mean, slept with? And such. And he's like, I'm going to kill you if I ever catch you. And he's like, I know, that's why I waited for the top of the hill. I adore this movie. It's very Canadian. It's very indie. And I think it's absolutely delightful. If you do get a chance to see The Climb, I highly recommend it. I don't think it's one of these movies that you're going to watch over and over again, but it's definitely worth that one watch, hence why it's coming in at number 10.
Number 9 is a movie that I thought would actually be a lot higher on this list when I heard that it was being released. But nevertheless, I still had a really great time with Disney and Pixar's Soul. I wouldn't really call it one of Pixar's best movies, let alone one of Pete Docter's best. I personally still prefer, when it comes to Pete Docter, Monsters, Inc. or Up. And I think part of that is because, not gonna lie, for the first half hour, I was constantly smiling. I was loving everything that happened on screen. And in the last half hour, I teared up multiple times just because of how well executed the message was. This whole message where it's important to live life to its fullest, have multiple different passions, as opposed to finding one singular purpose that you're going to obsess over that will leave you unsatisfied and alienated from the other people in your lives. Pete Docter is incredibly well at executing messages that kids and adults can equally learn from in multiple different ways. The reason it's not higher on this list is because the middle portion, where Joe and 22 end up on Earth, there are a lot of plot conveniences and cliches that I just can't stand because they take the suspense out of the story. Kids, when they see these conveniences and cliches, know for a fact that it's going to be a happy ending regardless, so there's no element of surprise. And I gotta be honest, I thought Terry was the worst Pixar villain I've ever seen. It was bland, generic. The I'm right about everything motive just has no emotional weight to it whatsoever, and Terry didn't really even have that many chances to be funny. They had that one joke about the potato chips, but that was it. But nevertheless, in my opinion, Soul has some of Pixar's best characters, best individual moments, some of its best music, because the jazz score gives every scene this certain level of energy. It feels like its own character. And on top of that, Jamie Foxx and Tina Fey really do have great chemistry with each other. Tina Fey in particular steals every scene that she's in, and I'm just going to flat out say it, this is her best performance. She's never been better. Not in SNL, not in an Amy Poehler collaboration, none.
My number 9 pick is something that I did not expect to put on my list, And I've never saw this on Broadway, but Hamilton came out on Disney Plus, and I thought, I'll give it a try. Directed by Thomas Kail. It's Lin-Manuel Miranda, and it's all about the Founding Fathers, and it's this musical extravaganza. I adore this. It's 2.5 hours running time. It went by in a flash. I watched it twice in the same day the first time I saw it. It is absolutely magical and fun, and it's a great way to teach history. I mean, if you were an American history teacher, I would use this film. Minus a few F-bombs they had to cut out there and such. But, for Disney, they let it sneak in, but this is magical and musical and comedic. And I love the casting of every single character in this. This is a pitch-perfect musical adaptation. It's one of the best musicals I've seen in quite a long time. I would say this is better than La La Land. I like La La Land, but I don't love it. I do think that one has some story flaws and such. But this movie is probably the best musical in 20 years, by far. I'm going to say it's better than Chicago, it's better than a La La Land, it's better than a Hairspray. It just, for me, checks all the boxes of what a musical should be. A fun, whimsical, dancing, educational, fun time. But the songs are also so quotable, and you could listen to them. And I mean, Weird Al did a polka melody. So, Weird Al Yankovic.
Number 8 is another Disney movie that made me cry multiple times, especially during the last 20 minutes. But this is actually a documentary about one of the people that made Disney just so emotionally resonant back in the Disney Renaissance, back when he had a ton of creative control. The movie is called Howard, and it's a documentary about Howard Ashman, a playwright and lyricist who was responsible for the productions of Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, and Aladdin, the movies that have made Disney animation iconic forever. And he's one of those people that many Disney fanatics claim, myself included, is the reason that Disney has retained its popularity to begin with, because he had so much creative control. Creative control that's not actually focused until the last third of the movie, because the first 2 acts of Howard are really just his entire life story, what his childhood was like, how he became so creative about musical theater, his actual success and failures on Broadway with stuff like Little Shop of Horrors, and the friendships and collaborations that he had, including legendary Disney songwriter Alan Menken that would transfer over to The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, and Aladdin. The last third really puts the most emphasis on his work with Disney through this insane amount of behind-the-scenes footage that was just so nostalgic and shocking to watch. Seeing Howard Ashman, who was not a director, was not a musician because he never played an instrument, directing actors that he cast based on their acting and singing ability, how to sing certain songs, directing the orchestra on the amount of energy that they need to perform, and just listening to the results, waiting for his reaction, whether or not he's impressed or disappointed. It was absolutely insane. It was emotionally impactful. Alan Menken's original score for the documentary makes his contributions feel so beautifully bittersweet, especially considering his work with Disney were the last few years of his life, and you really wish that he would still be working with Disney to this day. If you haven't seen Howard, check it out. It's absolutely worth it.
My number 8 is Guns Akimbo. This is the Jason Lee Howden written and directed movie starring Daniel Radcliffe. This is Daniel Radcliffe waking up with guns sewn to his hands. It's as ridiculous as it sounds. The premise purposely speaks for itself. The trailer is absolutely pitch perfect on any of this delivery. And when you see this movie, it's not super long. It's It's an hour and 30 minutes. It is a thrill ride from beginning to finish. It's just an absolute blast. Because there's something about seeing Harry Potter. And I know, he's been doing other things. But for me, he's always Swiss Army Man or Harry Potter. Running around with guns, trying to just get anywhere and get these guns off his hands. And then he has to save his ex-girlfriend along the way, played by Samara Weaving, which is a really great performance for such a silly, sort of serial over-the-top movie. And it is an absolute blast. It's just so much darn fun. Oh my goodness. you really just have to see Guns Akimbo. That's my number 8.
Number 7 has got to be the most controversial choice on this list just because of the amount of hate this movie got when the trailer dropped, let alone before it actually got released, and that would be Blumhouse's The Hunt. And maybe it's because I'm neither conservative nor liberal that I didn't really have any problem with the shots being taken at certain individuals, but really, if you hate a movie before you see it just because it criticizes your political beliefs, doesn't criticize you, but the beliefs that you share with a multitude of different people, as opposed to actually judging the movie as a movie, y'all need counseling. You really do. The whole point of The Hunt is incredibly crystal clear just based on the fact that every character that dies in this movie dies because they drop their guard at the worst possible moment. They're consumed by hatred of people who are slightly different from them, race, gender, and of course political ideologies, and that's what ends up getting them killed. It's a movie that doesn't judge you for having political beliefs, but judges you for letting them get to your head and letting you be just as vindictive and cruel as the opponents that you're up against. Meanwhile, the badass action hero who is more concerned about surviving than starting a Twitter war, that's the exact reason that you identify with her the most as a main character. Betty Gilpin was incredibly badass. Hilary Swank was the perfect love-to-hate villain. And just judging this as a straight-up hard R action movie, it is absolutely insane. It features a lot of stuff that action fans have been begging for a long time. The action scenes are incredibly practical. They're shot in steady wide shots with longer takes. The violence is absurdly and comically over the top, and I don't know. I just had a great time from start to finish. I know I'm in the minority, figuratively and literally, for liking this movie, but hey, it was made by liberals poking fun at liberal mentality. We need more movies like that. We need more movies that emphasize that conservatism and liberalism each have strengths and weaknesses. So if only this movie made enough money, then that wouldn't be a problem.
Coming in at number 7 for me is another Canadian film, Disappearance at Clifton Hill. This is a young girl who sees a boy disappear, and many years later she remembers this because of photographs she realizes, and she says, I've got to track that down. This is directed by Albert Shin. It has an appearance by David Fincher as a radio host, and it is a absolutely bizarre and nuts sort of gritty crime thriller. And I watched this right before we went into lockdown last year, and I was thinking, that could be okay. This is actually really, really phenomenal. Not only does it have a great poster and a great cast of people I've never quite seen before, but knocked it right out of the park. It gives us a bunch of really unique and oddball settings, such as the restaurant setting all around Niagara Falls with this very interesting mood lighting and a very signature style of directing and cinematography, creating this odd sense of I'm drawn in to know what is happening. And it's absolutely a delight. I know Tyler is going to talk more about this one coming up, so I won't say everything there is to say.
Number 6 is actually the movie that I saw the most of in theaters. I saw this 3 times back in February when it came out, because at that point that was still plausible. And every single time that I saw it, Birds of Prey and the fantabulous emancipation of one Harley Quinn just got better because there were so many things in the background and the foreground that I had actually not noticed the first or even the second time around. I didn't really notice that Cassandra Cain's parents were yelling in the background about her, where one of them is saying, "You were the one who said you wanted kids. That doesn't mean I wanted that kid in particular." Like, little things like that that actually add a lot to the characters. I didn't even notice that Cassandra Cain, a pickpocket, is wearing an arm brace that she may or may not have actually gotten her arm broken by someone she was trying to steal from, or it was fake and she's actually just using it as a cover for her abilities. I love the fact that a hard R movie that doesn't even feature Batman has the most vibrant, upbeat, and optimistic looking Gotham City ever, and yet it still has that seedy, dark atmosphere that you would expect from Gotham City. The fight choreography, which I was already blown away by the first and second time, just got so much better because, again, hard R superhero movie where there are like maybe 10 to 20 seconds worth of superpowers, and the rest has this Jackie Chan mentality where everything and anything can be a weapon. Not just guns, but knives, fists, feet, baseball bats, lighters, cars, rollerblades, batons, an entire amusement park. Literally everything and anything can be a weapon. It was so creative, and the best part was, Kathy Yan films it in a way where you can actually see it. There's no shaky cam, there's no quick fire editing whatsoever, and the actors are doing their own stunts, even Rosie Perez. Harley Quinn, played by Margot Robbie, feels like a reinvention in the best possible way. I'm glad that we can make a Harley Quinn movie without the Joker really being that big of a presence. Jurnee Smollett and Rosie Perez were really good as their characters. Mary Elizabeth Winstead was not in it enough as Huntress. I got no problem saying that, but her limited screen time does make you appreciate the performance a lot more. Ella J. Bosco as Cassandra was a little more dry and condescending, and her acting wasn't as great upon repeat, but if we're judging it by a debut performance from a kid, she still did a really good job. And even though Ewan McGregor, again, is also really grating as Black Mask, especially upon rewatch, Chris Messina as Mr. Zaz more than makes up for it. I would love to see Christina Messina play a villain much more often. I don't really know what else to say. I think it might just be a guilty pleasure, but Birds of Prey was still a blast to watch. One of the best comic book movies I've seen in a long time. One of the most unique.
Number 9, I have the movie Kajillionaire, directed by Mirinda July. This is a family of shoplifters, and they steal packages, and they take items, and they return coupons. They have a dingy little office in the middle of nowhere that has to be cool by fans because the water leaks. They basically scrimp, save, and basically con their way through any possible scenario. Now, this movie is led by a bunch of unknown performances to me. I've never really seen these actors in anything. The most notable name is Evan Rachel Wood, which I think did a little bit of TV, but don't quote me on that. And this movie is really a grounded character piece about what does it take to survive? What does it take to steal? It's this desperation all wrapped up in this weird quirkiness, which is sort of funny, but sort of heartbreaking. I love the one scene where they get a coupon and they're trying to get money back for this coupon, because that's what they do. They try, and they go in and there's this absurdity to this, but this reality and desperation all wrapped up in this scene where she's trying to redeem a massage coupon. And she says, well, can I redeem it for cash? She says, no. And she's like, well, okay, I'll get a massage. And the parents come in later and they say, well, okay, did you get it? And they're like, we'll trade you for this rock, this stereo, this stack of CDs, anything. This sort of level of desperation that you find in and throughout these characters. It's a heartbreaking look at just these people that cling on to others to survive as a parasite. But it's very, very human at the same time, and these characters are all unique in their own way that I highly recommend Kajillionaire. This is a very, very indie release. I hope this gets nominated for Best Foreign Picture or something, even screenplay. Give me a nomination for this movie, because this is one of those smaller movies that definitely deserves the attention, and I love this movie. I adored playing this at the cinema, and I cannot say enough about Kajillionaire.
At number 5, we have The Sound of Metal. I've never been a huge Riz Ahmed person, mostly because of his career choices as opposed to his actual acting ability, because I never thought he was a bad actor, but having seen Sound of Metal, I can't wait to see what else he does next, because he really captures the pain, fear, and denial about this new position he's in life so well that it's heartbreaking to see him struggle at just the smallest little mistake that he makes as he's trying to become immersed or re-immersed in deaf culture. Darius Marder's direction and the fantastic, ever-changing, unpredictable sound design do a great job at putting you in the perspective of being amongst other deaf people and not really knowing what to expect, because there are certain scenes where there is absolutely no sound but all image, and in other scenes where there is image, there is sound but there's no talking for extended periods of time. and yet it never feels boring. It feels completely immersive, and the fact that this movie is open captioned from beginning to end at the request of the filmmakers feels so much more better. I would have liked to have seen a few more of the other side characters, like Olivia Cooke as Ahmed's girlfriend, but again, her limited screen time does make her presence feel a lot more impactful, led to a couple tear-inducing moments, and I cannot wait to see Sound of Metal again.
Coming in at my number 5 pick on my list is a sports movie. I know you're like, it's not Rocky. Why on earth would you put that on your list? Well, I did. Ben Affleck's The Way Back. This is a alcoholic who gets a job of teaching an alcoholic ex-sportsman who's got his life partially together. Partially, I say, because the film explores a lot of themes of that, who has to coach this losing basketball team back up to winners. And this is really a story of redemption, but not. And it's a wonderful, wonderful, uplifting film. And just when you think you know what's going on in the film, you don't. This is directed by Gavin O'Connor. It stars Ben Affleck, among many others. And it's Ben Affleck at his depressing best. Being this guy who's trying to be better than everyone else. Using his job and others around him to beat his alcoholism. Spoiler alert. That goes well. This movie's very, very moving. It's wonderful. Great performances. The way they film the sports is phenomenal from beginning to end. And this movie is absolutely phenomenal. If you get a chance to check out The Way Back, I highly, highly recommend this. I watched this on, I think it was Netflix or Prime or one of those streaming services. But again, totally overlooked for this year. Not underlooked because I guess not many people are watching it. I'm a big fan of Ben Affleck. I really like everything he does. I think that lately he's on fire. And I will say, Live by Night is a very interesting period piece. I do think it deserves a second watch and not what the critics said about it. But this year, it's The Way Back, and I may not be a sports fan, but I like what they're doing with this character movie and this character-driven The Way Back.
Number 4 is actually my favorite animated movie of the year. I thought it was going to be Soul at the beginning, and I thought it was going to be Soul at the end. But my favorite animated movie of the year is Wolfwalkers from Cartoon Saloon. And I think that's just because even weeks after I had seen it, I still kept thinking about the things that I had loved and things that I hadn't noticed before or didn't appreciate as much, but now they completely been sidestepped. I love the fact that the animation looks like it's half storybook, half preconceived storyboard, because the lines on the characters are visible without ever being distracting, but it's such an immersive experience. The fact that they film certain scenes in different aspect ratios, close-ups for 4:3, or these really wide epic battle sequences in your standard anthropomorphic vision, they were techniques that you don't see in animated movies very often, but I would like to see them done a lot more. They were distracting, but they never took you out of the experience. If anything, they got you furthermore into it. And the POV shots of the wolves, where you can actually visualize their senses, their hearing, their touch, their smell, their taste. It was just so unique and refreshing, and I instantly found those shots beautiful. And the animation's overall bright, vibrant color palette offset the more dramatic, dark tone of the rest of the movie very nicely. Honor Neefsey and Ava Whitaker's performances, 2 lead performances being by children in an animated movie, that is a huge risk that could fail very easily, but they both rise to the occasion. They were fantastic, and I think this was Whitaker's debut performance, but I wouldn't have even guessed. Even Sean Bean, who's already a great actor, gives such a good performance that elevates such a cliched and annoying, overprotective, ignorant father character into someone that you could actually identify with. And that's the main thing. As familiar as the story beats are, as familiar as the messages are, where people compare this to Fern Gully, Secret of Kells, or Princess Mononoke, it almost seems very self-aware of that, and actually throws in a couple twists to rearrange certain cliches in a way that actually does feel a little fresh and original. This isn't an environmental movie that happens to also be about racial tolerance. It's a tolerance movie that also happens to be about the environment. There's this awareness to the fact that we've seen stories like this before, but the familiarity isn't really what make you want to watch this movie over and over again. It's just how beautiful the atmosphere is. It's how well acted the characters are. It's how interesting, likable, and fleshed out the characters are. And the fact that it's all done in a movie that is for kids, but it's done in a darker, dramatic, and more serious fashion, it just executes this message so intelligently and so entertainingly.
Coming in at number 4, we have the Marx Barbaca. I butchered your name. I'm very, very sorry. Directed Palm Springs film. Now, I watched this. This is a recent addition to the list. I thought I had my list finished. But then again, I came along and boom, here was Palm Springs. This is Andy Samberg. I'm a big fan of Andy Samberg, which he wrote. And again, Akiva Schaffer and all the Lonely Island people helped out with his movies, as always, producing and such, and just making sure. This is a awkward and strange take on Groundhog Day. Andy Samberg gets trapped in a loop at the wedding, and he traps this girl that he likes very much in this loop. And it's odd and bizarre, and J.K. Simmons is trying to kill him with an arrow, bow and arrow. And every day they wake up and experience this wedding again and again and again and again. At one point, he tries to cut in on the first dance. It's absolutely hilarious from beginning to end, but also incredibly heartfelt. This is one of those movies that I've seen things, but not quite like this. It's unique and funny and witty, but it's also absolutely heartbreaking. And it's got the chemistry between the two leads is absolutely magnificent. I cannot believe I did not catch this earlier in the year. And again, it wasn't available to me, but I do think that this movie is a very, very fun way to do things. Remember, I guess they come back the next day.
Number 3 is one of the only 2 movies this year that I actually gave a 5 out of 5 of. And a lot of people are going to say, this movie came out last year. Not where I live, it didn't. And that is Celine Sciamma's Portrait of a Lady on Fire. Everything that can be said about this movie has already been said. And you know what? For once, they are absolutely right about everything. Sciamma's direction is beautiful. The 8K cinematography really does make every single shot feel as if it were a portrait. And the bright, vibrant colors that are added into the cinematography, the set design, and the costume design definitely raise expectations up to about 12. The 2 lead performances, the performances that rely so much on this movie being a character study, were so good that even though it moves at an incredibly slow pace, even though there are about 10 to 15 minutes worth of music tops, these characters were so interesting and the performances were that good, I could have watched them do anything on screen without ever getting bored, and that's the best compliment that I can give a movie like this. Portrait of a Lady on Fire, I had absolutely no flaws with, and to this day, I still don't.
Coming in at number 3 is a 2-hour biopic, Zappa. Now, for those of you not aware, this is about Frank Zappa. This is about his life, his times, his education, his growing up, his impact on the music business, the time he ran for president, literally about his entire life. Frank Zappa is, to me, such a strange and unique figure. Zappa released all the classic songs that you would know, and then a lot that you didn't. He was an innovative with the Mothers of Invention. The way he did Apostrophe and 50/50, those 2 albums back-to-back were phenomenal, with Don't Eat the Yellow Snow and Uncle Fonzo's Pancake House. Even Joe's Garage in 81 was quite revolutionary. This details his life all the way up to his death, and it's such an in-depth look at Zappa from his friends, from people who knew him. It's honestly the best Zappa doc I have ever seen. I'm a big fan of Frank Zappa because some of his members spun off to create the band Littlefoot, which is weird and psyche and proggy, and it's just right up my alley there. And it's directed by the Bill and Ted guy, Alex Winter, who, again, is a big, big fan of music. We get this beautifully crafted piece that you will feel intimate, like you know Zappa when you're done with it. I highly recommend this if you can find this. If you're not a Zappa fan, I think you're going to love this because it's just an interesting piece that says, here's a man, here's what he wants to do. He did it.
Number 2. How does a basket orphan son of a whore and a Scotsman drop trapped in the middle of a forgotten spot in the Caribbean become the most streamed movie of the year, and for once, nobody complains about that, and for damn good reason. That is Hamilton the movie. And again, there are things that are great about this movie that you guys already knew about just by listening to the album. The performances by the entire cast are fantastic. The music that is written and composed by Lin-Manuel Miranda is incredibly catchy, hilarious, dramatic, incredibly thought-provoking too. But with this movie, I feel like the true star of the show is Thomas Kail, the original director of the play, who shows that he has a deep understanding between what works directing the stage and what works in directing a movie. The close-ups for the more emotional moments of the story, combined with the wide shots that show the entire spectacle of what it is to really see a performance on Broadway and in a movie that are equally great. The performances, the dance choreography, the set design, the costume design. In the theater's case, the lighting cues, where red, white, and blue take on completely different symbolic meanings just as a stage performance, which really, how often do people actually think about that? He shows that he has a lot of promise as a film director. I hear that he's going to direct the reboot of Oliver and Company, and I salute you for that. Regardless, Thomas Kail elevates something that was already great as source material and creates a movie that, listening to an album or watching a play from one certain seed, you couldn't have that same emotional impact. You just couldn't.
Coming in at my number 2 is Bill and Ted Face the Music. This year was not the most positive year, it was not the most fun year, but the one thing I can say is I saw this in theater 3 times. I freaking love Bill and Ted Face the Music. Keanu Reeves is in his connaissance right now with John Wick and doing all these films. They want to put him in the MCU universe somewhere. But this returns after the Bill and Ted Bogus Journey, and the first film, which I absolutely adore. It's one of those films I saw in high school, and I thought, I love this. It was along with Monty Python, The Holy Grail, and Naked Gun, and all those sort of things. It was one of those comedies that really just hit my funny bone. And when this came along, I thought, oh, it could be fun. But this is more than fun. This is exactly what I wanted out of Bill and Ted. It's exactly what a Bill and Ted movie should be. Their daughters are expertly played. It's so much fun. They have to go back to find this song to save the universe. And it's just so much darn fun. It's so happy. They even bring death back. And all the characters and creations, all the music they create in this movie is an absolute blast. It's awesome to see Bill and Ted as slackers and say, look, they never made it, but you know what? Here they are trying to save the universe again. And it may be, a lot of people would say, maybe they're a little too old. Nah, this is perfect. This is the perfect swan song to end the Bill and Ted trilogy. Well, it is the end of the Bill and Ted trilogy, I hope. They go back, they nail their roles, they look like they're having a blast. Their daughters are having the best time. It's a very simple story from point A to point B, only varying a little bit from the plot. And we get some awesome characters just running around this, being Bill and Ted. And the finale it makes me so happy. It's just so delightful to see everyone playing music together to save the universe.
Alright guys, my number 1 movie of 2020 was a movie that from beginning to end, even though I had watched it on a Saturday night at 9:30 after I just came home from work, watched it till 11:30, had to wake up early to go to work on a Sunday morning. I watched the entire movie, and from start to finish, I was never bored. I was always fascinated by what was happening on screen, was Nomadland. Much like Roma, Call Me By Your Name, and The Florida Project, the movie itself doesn't just have a beginning, middle, and end. Every single scene has a beginning, middle, and end too that really adds to the slice-of-life atmosphere that Chloe Zhao as a director, as a writer, and an editor strives to accomplish. And she creates something that really does feel like real life, where the most unexpected moments, whether they be small or big, still have a huge emotional impact on our lead character. Frances McDormand, in my opinion, gives her best performance of all time for one specific reason. She has to portray so much hidden emotion with so little to work with. There are so many scenes where it's just by herself in any given location that she finds herself in and decides to live in for a short amount of time. And I can't say the same thing about her in Fargo. I can't say that about her in Three Billboards. This, in my opinion, really is her best performance because she really does show that even with very little, you can still communicate so much. She will definitely be an Oscar contender this year. David Strathairn, I also hope it does get some Oscar consideration because this is my favorite performance of his too. Usually he plays the stuffy businessmen in suits who are right about everything. But in this movie, he proves that he can actually play a down-to-earth character while still being incredibly flawed based on the mistakes that he made in his past. I really do hope that he gets considered for Best Supporting Actor. The performances by the actual nomads playing themselves actually brought the most amount of tears to my eyes because I can definitely tell that they were sharing their own personal struggles and personal pains to us as an audience. And combining real people with fictional characters like Frances McDormand was absolutely seamless. I've seen directors use professional and non-professional actors, and they're good at it, but they have never been this good. I don't really know what else I can really say, because I don't want to spoil that much about Nomadland. It's a very simple slice-of-life story. Frances McDormand is down on her luck, and she decides to deliberately live that way and discover so many new different outlooks on life, discover so many people in life that she would have never become friends with. And to this day, probably still wouldn't have. And it's a great example of how just because you live on your own doesn't mean that you're missing out on life. And that is such a great message to have. I can't wait to check out more of Chloe Zhao's stuff. I'm definitely going to check out The Rider on TIFF Digital. I am definitely checking out Eternals when it does come out in theaters. Nomadland is the best and my favorite movie of 2020. Definitely check it out when it comes out in February. You will not regret it.
Coming in at number one, and Tyler, you named it, Doolittle with Robert Downey Jr. I know this may come as a surprise to some of you, but not to Tyler. I am a huge fan of the Dr. Doolittle books, the Dr. Doolittle movie from 1959 with Rex Harrison. I do think that that has some of the most charming songs and is the possibly best adaptation. And I came into Doolittle. It's not Dr. Doolittle. I'm not a big fan of the Eddie Murphy, but that's just because it's not too close to the books that I grew up with. This one is a delightful romp. It's fun. It has a musical number. I know people are like, it's a cash grab. It's really bad. But I had a blast watching this movie. All the animals talking are delightful. It's a very simple plot from beginning to end. It's nothing great. It's not fanfare. It's not going to break any records. It won't be nominated for many Oscars. But I watched this 4 times in theaters. I really liked it. Oh my goodness. This is just such a fun movie. There's no words to describe how much fun I had. And the number one movie for me every year is always, how much fun did I have in theaters? How much fun did I have just watching this film on the big screen? Did it bring me joy? Did it bring me delight? The number one movie is never, that's interesting. I love a good interesting movie or a doc, but for me, this just hit the spot. And I don't know anyone else who likes this movie. So I'm the only one. But I will say, welcome to the world of Dr. Doolittle. Thanks for joining us on the Joshcast. Tyler, take us out.
Guys, thanks as always for watching. Thank you to Josh for having me on his channel yet again, even though we're technically not in the same room. The show must go on, and I really do love creating content with you, man. I'm looking forward to making a worst of the year list with you. Very loosely. As always, guys, let us know in the comments below what are some of your favorite movies of 2020. What are ones that you love just as much as we do? Be sure to stay tuned for more videos on Josh's channel and on my channel. And as always, be sure to like and subscribe. Take care.